The 12th season of Consider This is brought to you in part by From the Top, a national program showcasing the musical talents of young people. From the Top can be heard on KVNO Classical 90.7 each Saturday at 6 p.m.
Consider This, a program of issues and information behind today's news. Once again, from the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha, here is your host, Kathy Wyatt.
Take a look at the cover of this book. It's called Early Work. The man you see is an internationally renowned artist with a very special connection to Nebraska. Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Wyatt. Welcome to this week's edition of Consider This. Our topic today, the life and times of Enrique Martinez Celaya. He is a visiting presidential professor at the University of Nebraska. He's in Omaha to interact with faculty, staff, and the community. Thank you so much for joining us and welcome to the show.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Good. Before we get too far into the interview, let's just go back to the beginning, starting with where you were born and grew up.
I was born in Cuba in 1964, 6 years after the revolution. And then we left my parents were not in agreement with the revolution, so we moved to Spain, lived in Madrid during Franco, and from there went to Puerto Rico. From Puerto Rico, I came to this country for college and graduate school, and I went to Cornell for undergraduate school, and then Northern California for graduate school, and then Southern California. So I have been here in the United States since 1982.
Okay, and you're an artist now, as we know, but it wasn't always that way, was it? You started off in something entirely different.
Entirely different. Well, when I was a little kid, I was an apprentice for a painter, and I was very interested in art, but I didn't think that was a viable career for a migrant like myself or an immigrant. So I studied physics, and I went to graduate school to do a PhD in physics at Berkeley in quantum electronics, and I supported myself as a scientist for many years when I was switching my career to art. So now I have that background, which I appreciate. I'm really very grateful for that background. But I don't do physics anymore. So.
Okay. Do you miss it?
I miss it. There's a concreteness to physics, a certain ability to go back and check and make sure something is in fact right that we don't have in art, and I appreciate that. And also physics was a great legacy to have. I think I was very proud to be a physicist, and I sometimes long for that sense of certainty that physics has.
And obviously you've been a lot of places and done a lot of things. Tell us how you became connected with the University of Nebraska, specifically this visiting presidential professor.
Sure. Nebraska has become very important to me. 10 years ago, Dan Seidel, who was a curator at the Sheldon and now is a professor at UNO, acquired my work for the Sheldon collection. And through that connection, I came to Nebraska a few times and met President Milliken. And President Milliken and I became friends, and we wanted to do something big, something interesting, and we decided to somehow involve the university and the community. And he asked me to be a presidential professor, and I accepted, and I really hope that the trust he has put in me, on me, I merit it. So what I have tried to do is come back here. First last year at Lincoln, this year at UNO, and be involved with the community, with the students, and I'm especially happy to be here this 100th anniversary of UNO, so it has been a very special time to be here.
Okay, very good. And you obviously have quite an extensive itinerary while you're here. Talk to us about specifically what you've been doing with the folks you've seen.
It has been a very busy schedule. We have I have interacted formally and informally with faculty and students. I have been involved in a philosophy class, discussing with faculty and students. I have been in several art history classes, book arts, communications class. And on Tuesday, I gave a public lecture at the Kaneko Center, sponsored by the University of Nebraska. So I've really run the gamut of interaction with the community and the students, and I'm really looking forward to coming back next semester again.
Very good. Did you have any surprises when you came here? Was there something maybe that you didn't expect, or has it all gone pretty smoothly so far?
Well, it have gone very smoothly, but I have to say I was very surprised in a positive way when I was included in the convocation of UNO. I have been a professor before, but it was very touching, very moving to me to be involved with UNO in that way, to be able to participate and feel a part of this celebration. So I think that was probably the highlight of my visit.
Now, in addition to your artwork, which we'll take a look at in just a few minutes, you also do a lot of public speaking, as you've mentioned. Do you have an overriding message when you're talking in front of folks, regardless of the audience? Is there a certain theme that you're trying to hit?
I said it's a good question. In the convocations, Senator Hagel spoke of the importance of critical thinking, of trusting our own judgment of things. I think this is a very important message. And I will also add to that the importance of raising our standards, mine, all of ours, not moral and intellectual standards. I think that double message of critical analysis and raising our standards are, I would like to be able to say that I convey that, even if I don't live up to it in my practice all the time. But that is the aim.
And generally, how is that theme then received from what you've been able to tell?
Well, I think there may be some resistance at times, but I think people want to believe that. I think in an age where everything is relative and there's a lot of lip service based to excellence, but sometimes mediocrity is more popular than excellence, I think people like to hear that. And also people like to hear or be encouraged to think critically for themselves rather than being spoon-fed ideas. So in general, I think the reaction has been very positive, both when I give lectures or when these themes comes up, and it's empowering to the audience, I think.
Toughest audience to date that you can think of, whether that's here or in all of your travels, do you recall an audience that perhaps you were speaking to that maybe didn't receive your message like you thought they would, or was a little more challenging?
I think the toughest audience was my daughter's preschool class when I had them come over to my studio. I think in many ways, and I say that not just to be cute, I think that they, in some ways, they strip you out of titles, they strip you out of reputation, and you have to be there with them, very present. And I think in some ways exacerbates all the weaknesses that you may have when you're with them. So that was a tough audience to work with.
Well, and I'll go to the next question in just a minute, but this kind of ties in with it. What did that class teach you? I think it taught me and continues to teach me, because I have the kids come over all the time to the studio, to remain fresh, to look at things new again. The kids were running around my studio looking at the work and had these very interesting comments. I mean, that they surprised me. So I appreciate the idea of not becoming too much of an expert on my own thing, to remain that fresh like they do. Okay, very good. And the next question is, for as much as you do teach people, whether that's through your writing, your speaking, your artistry, I'm curious, and you've had a few trips here, you said to Lincoln, and this is your first to Omaha. What have you learned from Nebraskans? Well,
the obvious thing, which I think Nebraskans are very open and in many ways have a certain kindness that is harder to find in the coast. So I have appreciated that. But perhaps the thing that I have learned the most from Nebraskans in my visits is they have a certain restlessness, which seem to make them more willing to keep working when somebody else might become complacent. And I think that has been an interesting lesson for me. I have watched them, I have watched the people who I consider my friends and the people who I don't know very well. And I see that quality in them. I don't know if it comes from being in the plains, for the struggle against winter, but it is a very wonderful quality.
What about the students in particular here at the University of Nebraska, Omaha? What have you gleaned from them during your visit?
Students are always the most hopeful part of being involved with the art world. And the students here in particular seem to be very genuine, unguarded, in ways that they may not be in other places. That also poses a challenge, and I think that's part of what the university and President Milliken in particular would like to do by bringing somebody from the outside world in to kind of activate some things. So it's wonderful to have students that are not so guarded, but it's important also to give them some challenges that will take that genuine quality they have and make them better students, better artists, better accountants, whatever they may be. So it's an interesting play between freshness and openness, and also not allow, just be willing to challenge yourself and do something interesting with that.
Okay. And obviously you're challenged in your work, I would imagine, on a regular basis, but I'm curious what inspires the artwork that we're about to see, and we will look at that in a few minutes, but what has been your greatest inspiration? What drives this passion that you have for art?
Since I was a little kid, I felt that I needed to understand life better. I felt that I was not very well prepared to understand things. So I have made my work to make more sense of life, to understand things better, to know how to be a better father. And that's what inspires the work. I mean, I know it sounds very general, but in day-to-day actually has a ethical utility, an application on how to make choices about life that I appreciate. That's really my principal inspiration is life, and my work ultimately goes back to life.
Okay. And we were talking a little bit earlier before this taping about your definition of art. I think sometimes we think of art, those of us who are not as obviously as gifted or as talented, we think of art more as painting or sculpting, things that you're able to see. And you were talking about art in your terms, in much broader terms. Define art as you see it.
Well, I won't try to define it, but it's difficult. But I think I understand what you mean. For me, art is really a way of being engaged with the world, in a certain quality of being engaged with the world. So I consider the teaching to be part of my work. I consider this conversation we're having to be part of my work, or the books to be part of the work. And the idea is not to soften the boundaries of art to the point that anything can be art, is to try to raise the standards of every action I'm involved in to make sure that it measures up to what I would do in a painting or a sculpture, and vice versa, that all those engagements, like this engagement you and I are having, goes back to the work again, to the paintings, to the sculptures. It's inevitable that any exchange like this one changes me. And because I'm changed, I will work differently about it. But I like the idea of art in the expanded field. An artist that is in the world, not outside of it.
Interesting. Okay, well, let's take a look at some of your work. We have 6 slides, and we'd like to start with the one that we open the show with. And it's called Early Work. It's a book. If you could go ahead and walk us through that particular one.
Yeah, the image we're looking at here is the cover of my recent book. It's a survey book that tries to look at the work that I have done since the beginning. It includes the contributions of several writers who I respect. And the idea here of early work, which is it's a line on the sand, the idea that this is what came before something else. It's a very special book, I think, certainly for me, not just because it's my work, but because the very way in which it was made responds to many of my preoccupations about the making of art.
Okay.
And it's distributed by the University of Nebraska Press.
Okay, wonderful. And here is the second one.
That's a portrait of oil painted on tar. It's a very large painting of a mentor of mine called Leon Golub, who was a New York painter and somebody who I was very grateful to have in the world as a companion. So when Leon died in 2004, I made this painting as a way to deal with his death.
Okay. And the next one?
This is an image of a project I did for the Berlin Philharmonic. What you're looking at there is a refrigerated bed. It's a bed made out of bronze that through a system of refrigeration, it freezes and it frosts. And the painting behind it is made with tartan feathers. And it's based on Beethoven's deathbed. And it opened the season at the Berlin Philharmonic in 2004, and then the orchestra played the late concertos of Beethoven as the piece was in this special place that was made for it.
Okay.
What we're looking at right here is a wood sculpture that is going to be part of my upcoming exhibition in Los Angeles. It's a very large wood sculpture, and here it's being burnt to blacken it and also to seal it. In the process of working on this sculpture, I cut my hand, and it was interesting that this process of burning the sculpture probably, I think, has something to do with what happened before me cutting my hand with the chainsaw in the process of making it.
Wow. Okay.
This is a large oil painting, a little boy standing on a rock about to either cross or fall into that little stream. It was from my show in New York last year. And it's a very, I would say, as typical as my work might be, which changes all the time, this is a typical image of a landscape and a desolated figure within that landscape dealing with issues like light and trees and water, very sort of basic stuff. And it belongs to one of my paintings, but from show to show, my work evolves and changes. So it's very difficult to talk about a typical image, but if there was one to choose, that would be it. And here we have a painting for my upcoming exhibitions. My upcoming exhibition is called Daybreak, and they have not been made public. The gallery preferred to keep everything secret until the day of the opening, but one of the things that I did at Kaneko was offer a preview for Nebraska of what that show would look like. And this is one of those paintings. It's a boy in a field of dandelions. So what I'm very interested in a painting like this is the fragility of those dandelions. That is a moment that will only be like that for a very, very briefly. So I'm interested in the fragility of that moment with that boy within the landscape.
Wow. Okay. How many works total have you done?
If you ask my dealers, not enough. But I don't know how many I have done. Over the years, I make less and less. It's not that I'm trying to make less. It's just that that's the way it has worked out. I think my involvement with writing, with teaching, and so on have slowed down my ability to make work. But independent of the number, certainly the trail behind me of work, like in the book Early Work, is a trail that mirrors my life and what has happened and the failures, the hope for success here and there, the birth of my children.
I ask because it seems as though when I look at works like that, regardless of what we, the audience, believe or think when we see it, we certainly appreciate the time and the thought. And in your case, as you're trying to tell your story, all of that goes into it. And I can't imagine, for example, if we were to pull the last piece that you discussed, how much time does something like that take from start to finish?
And the best answer I know for this, although it sounds kind of like a flippant answer, but it's actually a very good answer. Picasso answered that question by saying, it took me my whole life to make that work. And let me try to explain that a little bit better. 10 years ago, I would not have been able to make the same work, even, no matter how many hours I put into it, because it takes a process of development. Sometimes what may be very quick for me now is only because certain freedom that comes with years of doing something, with certain willingness to give up on something I held so dear to me. So sometimes some works, for example, I have works in my new exhibition that took 2 years, and I have works that took about a month. They look the same on the surface, right. But something about the journey through one work or another it moves very differently in time, and the result is, I wouldn't say one is better than the other, it's just that the journey was different. So it's hard. That's the reason why I cannot be a production artist or an artist that caters to the market, because I can never gauge how long something is going to take.
So I'm curious, if you were to create a work based on your experiences here at the University of Nebraska, what would that look like?
It is difficult for me to say, because one of the things, I never prepare studies. I never even like to think about a work before I do it. But certainly I know some of the feelings that will be involved. I mean, I think that the landscape of Nebraska, these plains, have been very, they have affected me quite a bit. I think about them often. I did a show in Australia in which I used the landscape of Nebraska for that exhibition. So I think the landscape will influence me. I think the friendships that I made will influence me. The hope that I see somewhere will affect me. But it's impossible to know what the work will actually look like.
Now, for those people watching, you said you did use some landscapes from Nebraska. What specifically?
Well, my landscapes, that's a very good question, because my landscapes are always constructed. I'm made up. I don't use reference. I don't use photographs. So I'm sure for a Nebraskan that knows the landscape, they will laugh at my usage of it, because I internalize the landscape and then I paint it. So I came up with my sensibility about plains and the sky, the way it felt, the way a river meandered through that open plain. And there was no place in particular, just the feeling of it.
Now, so for those people watching, where could they find this particular work?
It's called the Liverpool Street Gallery in Australia. The works were all sold, but the gallery has those probably works on the website.
Oh, on the website.
In Sydney, Nebraska, in Sydney, Australia. Actually, there's a Sydney, Nebraska too.
Yeah. So they could log on to the website. We're going to give a website address later on here, but they could log on there and find.
Yeah, they will find images from that work.
I would imagine they think that was pretty interesting. Thank you for sharing that with us. Now, in going through your information, I understand that you're very interested in something called Whale and Star. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, in 1998, I decided that I wanted to be involved in publishing, because I am interested in writing very much, in literature, and I felt there were some ideas that I wanted to put out in the world. Some of these ideas I felt were underrepresented in the world. So we created a small publishing house, myself and my assistants, called Whale and Star. We publish 3 titles a year, and they are distributed by the University of Nebraska Press, who has been very kind to us. I mean, we're a tiny publisher, but they have been very supportive, and because of their help, our titles are internationally received, very well received. Okay. Lucky to say, happy to say.
Very good. Well, there are a lot of artists out there, a lot of people who are living day to day, just as you, kind of maybe not waiting to be inspired, but who are inspired and then translate that into their works. And we've talked about this throughout the interview, but if you could sum it up, what really does make you different than other artists or people who are inspired to do work like you do?
It's very hard for me to answer that. I mean, I think I don't have a product or anything that distinguishes me, and I try to make sure there isn't anything like that. But I know what I'm not. I'm not a market-driven artist. I am not somebody who considers myself an expert. I feel like I'm a beginner, and I like it that way. So, but even that is not distinctive, because some artists I respect have felt that way too. So I'm just somebody trying to make the best work I can, and failing all the time.
Well, speaking of best, and I doubt that, but speaking of best, let's talk about a few favorites. Favorite work you've ever done, and why?
I think one of the most special works for me will have to be the work that I did for the Berlin Philharmonic, because that work was very involved and allowed me to interact with the orchestra, Sir Simon Rattle, the conductor, and I got to see them work, and I worked day to day with them. And then on the opening night, we got 6,000 people come to the opening day, which was remarkable, and it was very moving. And then the orchestra the orchestra, just on their own, because there were so many people waiting to go in, they laid themselves out along the line and played the late concertos of Beethoven in the lobby. So I think that was very touching for me.
Wow. Favorite, you've obviously been around the world, favorite place you've ever been and why?
I think my favorite city is probably Berlin, and it's hard to know why that is. There's nothing. It's not a glamorous city like Paris is, but it's a very special city, and very quickly actually. And I don't say that just because I'm here now. I think Nebraska had become a place of affection for me. When I landed this Friday, and the plane was coming down in Omaha, I was surprised that I had this very homecoming feelings to me. I mean, I'm not from the Midwest, far from it, but somehow through the friendships I made and the relationship I made with the university, it felt like a place that I appreciate very much.
Most memorable moment?
I think the birth of my children, each one. So 3 most memorable moments, the birth of each one of them.
And how old are your children?
My daughter, my oldest is a girl, 6.5. Then I have a boy who's 5 and a boy that is 3.
And probably 3 of your biggest fans too, I would imagine.
Oh, they're my biggest critics. You know, my daughter loves to paint, so she has all kinds of opinions about the work and so on. So they're always involved in the studio. I have a place for them in my studio, and they're always coming. So, but hopefully they're fans somewhere in there.
Okay.
So.
And very, very quickly, we just have a few seconds left. Anything on the horizon? Where do you go after you leave Omaha?
Well, immediately I have a show in Los Angeles, then a show in New York, then a show in London, and I close the year next year. I'm doing a special exhibition at the State Museum in St. Petersburg in Russia.
Excellent. Now, we promised a website to our viewers, so we'll put that up now. For more information on Enrique's work, www.martinezcelaya.com. In the meantime, we want to thank you so much for joining us and for spending the time with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks to all of you at home. We will see you next week.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information and program archives can be found at untv.unomaha.edu. If you'd like to share your comments about this show, call UNO TV at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours.
The 12th season of Consider This is brought to you in part by From the Top, a national program showcasing the musical talents of young people. From the Top can be heard on KVNO Classical 90.7 each Saturday at 6 p.m.